Well, welcome to Meck's Online Campus. One of the distinguishing marks of our culture is that we like lists. We follow the leaderboard in golf, the rankings in football and basketball, the points in NASCAR, the percentages in baseball. We like to read who makes up the Fortune 500 list of companies, who's on the Forbes list of richest Americans. We follow which stocks and mutual funds had the top performance. We like lists on the best-selling books and the top-grossing movies, most visited websites. We like lists. Mental Floss even compiled a list of history's most important lists. Making the top 10 were things like Benjamin Franklin's list of 13 virtues, the Hollywood Blacklist. I don't know if you remember that or read about that. You wouldn't remember it. I don't think not many would. Even I'm not old enough to actually remember it. And I'm ancient. But that was a list of actors and screenwriters and directors that were forced into unemployment by the House Un-American Activities Committee for allegedly sympathizing with the Communist Party. That was between 1947 and 57, the whole era of McCarthyism. But coming in at number one on their lists of history's most important lists, and I wouldn't even have thought of it, was Santa's list, the list of who has been naughty and who has been nice. So why do we like lists so much? Well, I mean, obviously lists bring order to chaos. It helps us organize what would otherwise be overwhelming. Lists help us remember things, whether it's a shopping list for the grocery store or a to-do list for the coming week. Lists help us remember what we have done, what we have still left to do. Lists can be meaningful. Such as the famed Schindler's List that was the basis for that famous movie by Steven Spielberg, where a German businessman made a list of 1,000 names to save more than 1,000 Jews from the concentration camps. So wouldn't it be great if God did one? Put some kind of list on life, kind of gave us a list of what would be this short, easy to understand, bullet point kind of list and guide. Take all of his counsel, all of his wisdom, all of his guidance and put it into a Cliff's Notes for the whole deal. Boil the whole spirituality thing down and relationship with him thing down to the bare essentials. Well, he did. And it's called the 10 Commandments. Now, I know that the minute I say 10 Commandments, all kinds of stuff comes to your head, like the old movie with Charlton Heston that they always play at Easter, even though it's not an Easter story, but that's when they kind of roll it out. Or the legal fights about whether they should be posted in schools or government buildings, or maybe just what comes to your mind is some legalistic, outdated set of do's and don'ts that you want nothing to do with. Well, for the next few weeks, let's see if I can change your mind. Let's see if we can suspend all of the negative images and ideas that we might bring to the table about the 10 Commandments and just let ourselves be challenged by taking a fresh look at each one of them. And when I say a fresh look, let me tell you what I mean. Look at each one of them in the way God had in mind. Because it really was something along the lines of a top 10 list, a summary of his guidelines and principles for a successful life. Here's the background, if you didn't know, of how we even got the list and its origin. God took his people aside right after the big exodus from Egypt, where they were liberated from slavery. This is the heart of the Old Testament story. And he hit the pause button and he said, all right, I'm going to take Moses, the leader of the people. I'm going to take him up on that hill there, and we're going to spend 40 days together. And I am going to give him all kinds of instruction and principles and guidelines that are going to serve you for 40 days. Then I'm going to send him back to you. And it's going to be so full of knowing how life is supposed to be lived that you will not believe it. And just to make sure that you're not overwhelmed by it all, I'm going to distill it all down to 10 things, 10 commandments. And I'm even going to write them on 2 big tablets of stone with my own, and so that you have them for you. And if you'll follow these, you'll be engaged in living life the way it's meant to be lived. You'll be on your way to managing your life for peak performance and optimal benefit and maximum effectiveness. And that's exactly what God did, and that's what we have in this list. And people have looked to these 10 statements as a roadmap for life ever since, until recently, when they have been increasingly caricatured and marginalized and politicized and most of all just left unknown. In fact, surveys show that the average person can't even name them, certainly not all of them. God's top 10 list for living, and for the average person, it's just unexplored territory. Well, let's not do that. Let's go exploring on this together. Because it is God's top 10, I believe it will prove to be one of the most significant investments you can make. And no, it won't take 10 weeks, just 6. Give me 6. Because we're going to start off with a collective look at the first 3, and then we're going to end with a collective look at the last 3, because those two groups kind of hang together with a single theme. So today, let's tackle the first 3 on God's list, and here's what they have in common, while we can kind of talk about them as a whole. They all have to do with how we should relate to God. They're very God relation centric. So let's jump in. By the way, the entire list is found in the Old Testament book of Exodus, the 20th chapter, if you ever want to read it. But here's the first one. Then God gave the people all these instructions. I am the Lord your God. You must not have any other God but me. That is the first of the 10 commandments. I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other God before me. Now, if I had to put that into a kind of a one-liner, here's what it would be. God is saying, put me first. That's the first thing God says that we need to do in order to live life the way it's meant to be lived. Now, God isn't saying that there really are other gods floating around out there that you could encounter and engage in a relationship. It's not like there are other gods and other universes that might arrive on the scene and this God just wants to make sure that he has a corner on the market. No, nothing is more clearly and emphatically taught in the Bible than the fact that there is one and only one God. So this commandment isn't saying that there are other gods out there, but that we can choose to have something other than God operate as God in our life. Which kind of rings true, doesn't it? For example, here's how I can find out exactly who your God is. If I could sit down with you for a few minutes, all I have to do is find out what you love most, serve most, seek out most, give to the most with time or money, care about the most, prioritize the most. And when I get answers to those questions, I'll know your God. I'll know who or what your God is. It might be your career. It might be the accumulation of money. It might be with how you look physically. It might be a particular position or degree. Might have to do with influence. It might have to do with power. It might be raw physical pleasure, anything from sex to eating. It might be your children or your family. It's not that these things are in and of themselves bad. That's not the point. It's just that we can allow things to kick God out of first place. Because whatever you allow to most control you, whatever is your ultimate value, what you ultimately allow to determine your course of action, to be the ultimate authoritative guide to decision making, the place of your loyalty, the source of your self-esteem, whatever it is that you most prioritize in your life that trumps everything else, okay, that's your God. That is your God. So the first commandment is simple. Put God first. Don't put God second or third or anywhere else down the line. Don't have any other gods but him. There's only one and only one place for God, and it's at the top. And that also means nothing else alongside of God. You know, some of us play the God and game. We want God and other things to be first. It's God and money, God and career, God and family that we want to try to prioritize and push down the field at the same time or put first. We don't want to say God isn't first, so we play the God and game. But that's not what putting God first means. It's God alone at top. When God says no other gods before me, it means no other gods before me or alongside of me or in addition to me. That's what no other means. No other. There can only be one thing that is first. One and only one thing, God. And that means you better watch what you put second too. Because here's what I know I have a tendency to do. I'll take what is second place in my life. And it's okay that I may have something second in my life, or third or fourth, however you want to rank it. But I'll take what is second and I'll just kind of left unchecked. I'll just kind of move it up closer and closer to where God is and where there's less and less and less of a gap between God and what I have in second place. And then one day I wake up and guess what? I put what was second on top and God now is second, if that. Because whatever is second is probably the biggest competition and the biggest threat to God truly being first in your life. When you put second, what you put second is like a little mini God that is chipping away your commitment to having God be on top. So the first commandment should also tell us that whatever is second should be a distant second. Now, you might understand why this is important theologically or why it's important intellectually and just in terms of just a very definition of God. Well, of course, he's on top. He should be first. But it's also important in terms of living life the way it needs to be lived and is best to be lived. God put this on his top 10 list because he knows that whatever other God you might bow down to, whatever other God you might have first in your life, whatever you order your life around besides him, will not come through for you when you need it most desperately. At some point, you're going to have trouble. There will be needs in your life. There will be a tragedy. There will be a crisis. There will come a time when you're on the phone dialing 911 so fast your fingers are going to burn. There will come a time when your life will feel like it got hit by a truck. And it may be happening now. If you look to something for help that can't come through for you, if you ordered your life around something other than God, then when life comes crashing down and you look to what you have ordered your life around that wasn't God to save you and work for you and come through for you and put things back together, no help will come. No cavalry will arrive. You'll be dialing 911. No one's going to pick up. The reality of this is described in the 115th Psalm of the Bible. Listen to its words. Our God is in heaven. Their idols are just made of silver and gold. They have a mouth and eyes, but they can't speak or see. Their ears can't hear, and their noses can't smell. Their hands have no feeling. Their legs don't move, and they can't make a sound. Everyone who made the idols and all who trust them are just as helpless as those useless gods. And that's the key word to remember. Helpless. Whatever you have as your God that's not the God, whatever you have put first that isn't him, will leave you helpless. Think about it. Imagine taking a survey and going to people and saying, okay, you are going to be able to choose something to be first in your life, something that will be the most important thing in the world to you. You will order your life around it. You will worship it. It will be what you will depend on for everything that matters to you. It's what you will turn to in times of tragedy, where you will go when you need answers to life's most difficult questions. You'll base your marriage on it. You'll raise your kids around its values and its ideas. And when you die, you will stake your entire eternity on it. Okay, what will it be? I don't think anybody's going to say, oh, that's easy. My job at Wells Fargo, my career path there, or my new BMW, or my family and that, or no one in their right mind would say my stock portfolio or real estate investments or a company. Most people would say, okay, this one better be something a little more reliable, a little more meaty, a little bit bigger, a little bit deeper than any of that. See, when we really stop and think about it, what should be first in our life is clear. It's God. But people don't stop and think about it. And maybe you haven't either. We do put relationships and career and money first in our life. And then we build our life around those things and put it first, only to find that we built our life around something that will not come through for us when we need it most. And God doesn't want that for you. That's why this is the first commandment. God loves you too much, cares about you too much, not to say, make sure you build your life around me so that you have me there for you as you go through life. Don't build your life around some meaningless, empty, false God that can't do anything for you, that can't listen, hear, care, or act. Put me first. Then he gives a second commandment. Make sure it's me. Here's how it's put. You must not make for yourself an idol of any kind or an image of anything in the heavens or on the earth or in the sea. You must not bow down to them or worship them. Okay, let's define the word idol, because that's the second time it's come up in what we have been reading in the scriptures. An idol is something that is made to represent a picture of God or a God, something that tries to capture the essence or image of a deity. Throughout time, it has usually been done through some type of statue, for example, some wood carving or totem pole or carving from a rock that would be made that would then be bowed down to and worshiped. In the second commandment, God says, don't do that. Whatever you do, please don't do that. Don't put a God up, don't make a God up out of your imagination to worship that isn't real in place of me. And don't make any kind of image of me that is going to make me to be something other than that I really am or distort who I really am. Don't give yourself to any kind of idea or image of the divine that isn't real or that isn't true. That would be the false worship of a false God. That's the second commandment. Now, right about now, you're probably saying to yourself, okay, well, this one's easy for me to check off the list. This doesn't have anything to do with me. I haven't made any idols. I haven't bowed down to any, statues. I certainly don't plan on doing that. So let's go ahead and save some time and move on to the third commandment. Okay, I get it, but no, we got to camp out on this one a little bit because it's not irrelevant. Don't move past it too quickly. Let's really get at what God's after. Because in truth, there are more people committing idolatry right now than at any other time in history. Because we really can create and do create an image of God that is not God and set up that image as God. See, any image of God, physical or mental, emotional or psychological, that is less than who he really is, misleading about who he really is, distorted in terms of who he really is, or opposed to who he really is, that's idolatry. And just like putting something other than God first in your life will not come through for you, putting a false God into your life will not come through for you either. There's one and only one true God, so make sure you get him right. Now, this should make intuitive sense to us, but it's still, again, it's not the way most people think. Many think that they can have any view of God they want, and it's okay. They don't have to be careful with how they think about God or view God or picture God or imagine God. Any image they want, any idea they want, any concept they want is okay because it's less about who God is and more about who they want him to be. I once read a book, I'll never forget, that it was about how people, it's kind of, they put it, how do people spell God? In other words, how do people view God throughout the world, And in the end, the authors talked about God in terms of climbing a mountain. They said that everybody knows there's just not one way to climb a mountain. Mountains are too big for that. And so just like the mountain, all the ideas about God throughout all of the religions of the world are just like different ways up the mountain. So they concluded, how do you spell God? Answer, any way you want. It doesn't matter. God is too big to be thought of and worshiped or defined in any one particular way, because all the names of God are all naming the same God. So if you want to think of him as a man or a spirit, a force or a crystal or a sunrise, a thought, a feeling, a psychological category, it's okay. There's only one problem with that. God, who very much knows who he is and what he is like and has gone to great lengths to make himself known. And in his second commandment, he makes it clear that we are not to come up with anything else to imagine or worship other than who he really is. We shouldn't come up with anything in place of him or a distorted view of him, physically or mentally. And the reason is clear. If the God you're imagining or worshiping isn't the real God, then you aren't in a relationship with the real God. So get the idols out of your head. Get the false images out of your thinking, including distortions about his nature and his character. For example, let me just give you some distortions real quick that are so common. God is not the mean cosmic cop whose mission in life is to be on sin patrol and catch you doing something wrong so that he can arrest you and throw away the key. God is the cosmic cop, is stern and strict and severe and unfeeling and by the book, a God who's just waiting for you to get out of line so he can slap on the cuffs because he's mad at you and angry and doesn't like you. That's not who God is. That is a false, misleading, distorted image. God is not the celestial Santa Claus either, the big grandfather in the sky who kind of smiles at everything we do and pats us on the head while he's giving us whatever it is we want. The God who is safe and comfortable and convenient and warm and fuzzy. That's every bit as false an image as the cosmic cop. And God is not just the big man upstairs. You ever heard people talk about the man upstairs like he's some John Wayne figure, or more recently, more like Jack Reacher or something. He's not the force of Star Wars, the idea that everything is God, that all things partake of one divine essence, and that great oneness is called God. These are just samples of idols, false images. So where do you get the right picture of God? If you don't want false images floating around in your head, where do you get the right one, the real thing? The Bible gives a singular, clear, specific answer. The fullest, most accurate picture of God is found in Jesus, nowhere else. The Christian faith maintains something startling, that Jesus was God himself in human form, that God did reveal himself. He did make himself known. He's made himself known in so many ways, but supremely through Jesus. Through everything, he's revealed himself through everything that has been captured for us in the Bible, through all of creation, but supremely through his coming in the person of Jesus. In Colossians, the Bible says, "For in Christ lives all the fullness of God in a human body." In Hebrews, the Bible teaches, "The Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being." In a conversation with one of his disciples, a man named Philip, Jesus put it as plainly as possible. Let's read their exchange. Jesus told him, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. If you had really known me, you would know who my Father is. From now on, you do know him and have seen him." Philip said, "Lord, show us the Father, and we will be satisfied." Jesus replied, "Have I been with you all this time, Philip, and yet you still don't know who I am? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. So why are you asking me to show him to you?" See, in Jesus, we have the only accurate and complete picture of the character, the attributes, the personality of God. God did not want us to be confused or to be misled. So in Jesus, he gave us the full picture, the only picture, the accurate picture. And it matters to get that picture of God right. During the Super Bowl that's coming up, advertisers will spend millions airing commercials they spent millions making, in order to get across as clear and compelling of an image of their product as they can be, because they know it matters. God knows image matters too. Only he didn't put out a 30-second spot, but a 33-year life, the life of Jesus. And he said, "Get that image of me right." That's the second commandment, which brings us to the third one. First commandment, put me first. Second commandment, make sure it's me. Third commandment, take me seriously. Here's the exact wording of the third commandment. "You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name." A name is serious business. It represents who someone is. Whenever you use that name, you bring that person to mind. You make a reference to them. And your use of that name either does justice to that person or it is an injustice to that person. It either honors that person or dishonors that person. God is wanting us to be careful with him, to be cautious with him. He's not someone to be toyed with. We need to take him seriously. We should never refer to him in a way that is empty or insincere or disrespectful or cavalier or frivolous. He is, after all, God. Think of the third commandment like a big sign outside an electrical power plant generator that says, "Warning, high voltage." Now, electricity is good, but you got to be careful with it. It deserves us to be careful. It bristles with power. And like the first two commandments, this is key to interacting with God, not only the way he deserves, but the way we need, the way that serves us and our relationship with him. Just think about how it works in other areas of life where so much hinges on giving someone or something the respect they deserve or it deserves. If an MMA fighter, for example, doesn't respect his opponent, underestimates him, and doesn't prepare like he should, he's probably going to lose that fight. If you don't take a class seriously and study the way you need to study when it comes time to take a test, you'll probably fail that class. If a child doesn't learn to respect the power of electricity and as a result sticks a fork in the socket or doesn't learn to look both ways before crossing a road, he could get hurt terribly if not killed by a car. It's important to learn what to take seriously, because if something deserves to be taken seriously and it isn't, it could cost you. That's what the third commandment is all about, taking God seriously. God says, don't make light of me. And that respect, that reverence starts with my name, because my name represents who I am. Now, when people think about misusing God's name, the first thing they think of is profanity. The old phrase, don't take the Lord's name in vain. And that would be right. That would be the first way to misuse God's name. The word profane comes from two words, pro, which means out of, and phanes, which means temple. You may not have known that was the meaning of the word. So profanity is using God's name in a way that is outside of its proper context, taking it outside of the temple, taking something sacred and using it in a way that is not sacred. This is the most common understanding of what the third commandment is about. And it is serious, and it's important to remind ourselves about that. I mean, let's face it, certain statements are just dead giveaways about people. If you were to overhear someone say, for example, that one of the problems with investing in penny stocks is that the buy-sell spread can be as high as 90%, it would be reasonable to assume that you were listening to a financial planner or investment counselor. If you were to hear somebody say that they were downloading new executable files and associated DLLs, or that they had been calculating the trade-offs between using a statically linked or dynamically linked load module, you could assume you were listening to a computer programmer. If you were to hear someone say, tell the doctor she's dilated to 8 centimeters and the epidural is in place, you'd known you were overhearing a labor and delivery nurse. So when you hear someone say, oh my God, when they're excited or upset, shocked or surprised, or join the words God and damn when they are angry, or they exhale Jesus or Jesus Christ when they are put out, what can you assume about that person? You can't draw conclusions about their vocation, race, gender, or income, but you can tell a lot about their heart and how they feel about God and whether they take him seriously or not. This is how Jesus once described it. He said, a tree is identified by its fruit. A good person produces good things from the treasury of a good heart, and an evil person produces evil things from the treasury of an evil heart. This next line's key. What you say flows from what is in your heart. But that's not the only way to fail to take God seriously in light of your use of his name. A second way that you can misuse God's name is to misuse it for profit or personal gain. In ancient times, names were considered to be very powerful. It was thought that if you used someone's name, some of their power came to you. We still believe that. Haven't you ever been around someone who's always name dropping? Or have you ever name dropped yourself? Why do we do that? It's because we think of what it might do for us. Mentioning the name of someone famous or successful and our interaction with them or their relationship to us, we're hoping that in some way it gives us extra leverage or it makes people look better on us, boosts our self-esteem, maybe opens up a door. We can do this with God. At its most basic is trying to get someone to believe us by using the phrase, I swear to God I'm telling you the truth. That's obviously not something we should do, but that's one way of name dropping. Then it moves up the ladder a bit with easy targets like greedy, unprincipled televangelists who use the name of God to make money off of overly trusting people just to line their own pockets and live an affluent, materialistic lifestyle. Or politicians who will throw around God's name in the right places and among the right constituents in order to get a vote, when in truth, God means very little to them. Or, picking churches based on where the best business contacts might be, or going to some kind of annual prayer breakfast just to network. You have no desire to pray. Look at what Jesus said about this. It's really interesting. He said, not everyone who calls out to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only those who actually do the will of my Father in heaven will enter. On judgment day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, we prophesied in your name. We cast out demons in your name. We performed many miracles in your name. But I will reply, I never knew you. So we can fail to take God seriously by misusing his name through profanity, misusing his name through the pursuit of profit. Let me give you one more to think about. We can do it by pretending. And that may be the most serious one of all. I once read of something that happened in Long Beach, California. It was several years ago, but it always struck me as it's very interesting. A man went into a fast food restaurant to get some chicken for himself and for the woman that was with him. When they drove up to the restaurant, they were going to go through the drive-thru. There's a really long line. So he says, I think it'll be faster if I just park the car and run in, you wait here, and I'll go in and get the chicken. So he went in to get the food, and he'd ordered a box thing because they were going to go to the park and have a picnic or something. And the manager of the store, when he gave him the box of chicken and stuff that was in it, he accidentally gave him the box that they had put, all of the money they had taken in that day that was getting ready to go to the bank. He'd give him the box of receipts. Well, the guy took the box, really didn't pay much attention to what was in it, and put it in the back of the car. They drove away. When they got to the park, opened it up, they saw all the money. He immediately went back to the restaurant and returned it down to the last cent. And the manager was absolutely amazed. He wanted to call the TV stations and the newspapers and tell them what an incredibly honest thing this guy had done. He wanted to post his picture on Instagram, cook up a good reel for TikTok, anything and everything to celebrate what this guy had done and give him the credit and fame that he really so justly deserved. And the guy said, no, really, I'm fine. You don't need to do any of that. Thinking he was just being humble, the manager said, no, come on, why not? Let me do this. And then the guy kind of pulled him off to the side. He said, look, I'm married, and the woman with me is not my wife. Sadly, that is where an awful lot of people are. We can have the appearance of being an honest person, a person of integrity. We have enough actions and words that would lead anyone to assume it or believe it, but it really isn't true of us. It's so easy to pretend about our lives, and one of the areas it's most easy to pretend is when it comes to God. It's easy to use his name, to throw it around, to claim it for our own when it's not true of us. We say we believe, but our life does not reflect it. We use God's name, but we are not God's person. We don't reflect God's values. It reminds me of a story I once read of a soldier who fought under Alexander the Great. Apparently, he hadn't fleshed out the kind of character and commitment and courage that Alexander expected of his soldiers. So he called for the man to appear in front of him. The soldier appeared before Alexander, poorly dressed, slouching, completely out of sync with what was expected of those in his army. Alexander asked the soldier for his name. The soldier kind of perked up and he said, "My name is Alexander, the same as yours." And Alexander the Great then said, "Change your name or change your ways." Jesus felt the same way about those who used his name, claiming to be associated with him. In Luke 6, he simply says, "Why do you keep on saying that I am your Lord when you refuse to do what I say?" The first 3 commandments on God's top 10 list are so important. They are all about how we should relate to him properly, how we should put him first, make sure it's really him, and take him seriously. Because when we don't, we'll have nothing to come through for us when we need it most. We'll be thinking we're interacting with the real God when it's a false one, and we will trivialize his place in our lives because we don't take him seriously enough. And none of those will give us the life we long for and the God we so desperately need. Okay? Next week, we're going to tackle the 4th commandment, one that, when followed, is almost always followed in the wrong way. You want one that we screw up on and totally misunderstand, it is this one. So wrong that it makes us resent it, hate it, fight it, ignore it. When following it the right way is actually breathes so much life and energy into us that once you see what God really wants us to do, you'll kick yourself for not putting it into place sooner. So we'll unpack that one next week. Until then, let me say a quick prayer for you. Father, I pray for all of us, myself included, that we would get you right. We would relate to you rightly. I'm so glad, and obviously we just stand in awe of your wisdom and counsel that when you made your list, the first 3 were all about how we're going to relate to you. Before we start looking at horizontal stuff, we're going to look at vertical stuff. And so thank you for that. And I just pray that we would put you first, that it would really be you that we're putting first, and that as we follow and worship you, we take you so seriously as you deserve. and how that just flows right back into our life in incredible ways that are so important. Thank you for the 10 Commandments. Thank you for the first 3 and how powerful and important they are. I pray all that in Jesus' name.